Hello, today we're going to talk about our pinch pot bowls with sgraffito. Last time we briefly talked about making clay body choices based on the colors you might want of underglaze. So just a reminder that you can see this is the same color underglaze, but it looks really different. So your first task is to choose your clay body. You should have spent some time today in class drawing some designs in your sketchbook. Either a fairly simple pattern is a great way to go. It's a pretty good way to just get started. You could also do some sort of design or text or things like that. What you draw in your sketchbook doesn't have to be exactly what you end up with, but you should start planning and thinking ahead. Then you're going to make your pinch pot. Remember to be a little picky with your clay. You need clay that is fairly plastic and flexible. So if you go to grab clay from the bag and it's a little hard, and it's too hard to really add some water to wedge it, then put that to the side in the same bag and grab some other clay, or talk to somebody about getting a new bag. I've already made my pinch pot and I've actually let this dry a little bit. So this is on the drier side. It's a damp leather hard. So it's still a little flexible, but I couldn't really shape it much more. So it's as thin as I want to get. Remember, your pinch pot piece should be pretty even and thin. So now I need to think about, do I want to smooth the surface or do I want to leave it textured? You are going to be drawing on top using a technique called sgraffito. Sgraffito is to scratch through. So this is an example of 1/2 and 1/2 clay with black underglaze on it, and then it's for text we've scratched through. So you can see there's a lot of contrast here. So of course this is a flat piece of clay. If you have something like this, well, you will, then the finger marks that you have, some people might want to keep those and other people might want to get rid of them. If you keep them, just know that they will sort of add some bumps as you're carving along. If you want to smooth them, you need to let your clay get a little drier. So either you can set it out in the sun for 10 or 20 minutes while you work on your slab cup or test tiles, or if you need to go and speed it up pretty quickly, then use the hair dryers. Next, I want to smooth it. So one way to do that is with a paddle. So I could paddle along. It's really about lots of small little taps instead of one big one. My clay, I don't want to flex it a lot because I will start getting bigger cracks, which I can repair, but I'd rather not if I don't have to. So I want to make sure that I'm gently holding my clay pinch pot. I don't want to hold it by the edge here because that's going to create stress and crack it on the edge. I want to support it by holding right on the inside kind of base or cupping it in my hand. So the paddle is one way, using the back of this spoon. Another way that seems counterintuitive but works really well is to use the scoring tool. So what I'm actually going to do is score. I'm going to scratch all over on this piece. I might put it down on the table. I like to put it down upside down so that I keep the rounded shape. Remember, if you store it this way, the pressure you put on it is going to slowly flatten it. So I'm actually going to scratch all around pretty aggressively because what I'm doing is actually shaving down those high points. You can see I'm doing that. I'm getting rid of some of that clay. I would do that all around, and then I would usually just use the same tool, this flat edge, and start to scrape and even out those those scratch lines. And you can see it starting to smooth out and reduce that irregularity. And then I might go in with my blue kidney tool, the rounded edge, and start smoothing it more. And then eventually coming in with perhaps just my fingers to smooth it. And you can see I'm going to get a really nice smooth surface here. Just a note, a damp sponge, right, is nice, but don't use it over much. I see that's a common beginning mistake, is people start using their sponge and it looks beautiful, but then what happens is you're actually removing the really fine clay particles, which then just leaves you with these sandier components, which you can smooth down with your finger, but they're always going to be a little more visible. So if you can get to this point without using your sponge, that's really great. And plus, if you oversaturate your clay, it gets too wet, then you're going to have clay that starts to kind of fall apart. Once you're done smoothing, right, then you need to think about, do you want to add anything else or alter it? Because all of those things need to happen before you add your underglaze, your color. Underglaze is similar to a colored slip, so it does go on before your clay has been fired. You can put it on afterwards, but for this purpose, it has to go on so we can carve through it for sgraffito. So we need to do all of our building first before we add any color. So for example, for this one I've smoothed. You could also smooth the inside, although obviously it's a little harder to reach in with your scoring tool or whatnot. where you put your design and your underglaze is going to be up to you. You could cover the whole surface, you could cover just the inside, you could do sections. That's your call. All I'm asking is that you do some sort of underglaze and sgraffito decoration. So this one you can see I flattened the bottom a little just by tapping it on the table. I could leave it like that, or if I wanted what's called a foot, which on a piece is this like raised kind of rim here, a foot, I might make a coil, which I could place on here. Remember, we would absolutely need to score and slip that on, score and slip here as well. And then I would use my finger or a tool to start to blend this down. And I could leave it if I liked this pattern, or I could get another tool and continue to smooth that as I go on the inside and the outside. And then when I'm done with that, then I would make sure I have it level. You might need to flatten it a little bit because you started with a coil, which is round, and then decide, okay, well, do I like the irregularity here? Some people love this. It's a great example of something that's been made by hand. Other people want it really level. So if it needs to be leveled, do you go with a ruler and measure and cut like we did for our slab cup? Or perhaps it's not a big deal and you just make a small coil and score it into place just to kind of patch it, right? And then I can smooth it together. Remember, if you have any cracks, like this is kind of showing a crack here, then I would want to patch it with what I call a little clay band-aid. So I might score that spot, grab a little smush of clay to patch it up, right? So all of these things have to be done before we add our underglaze. Going back to the foot, 1, foots are optional. 2, it doesn't have to be a circle. So think about what your design is. Is your pattern round, in which case a circle would make a lot of sense. Perhaps your pattern is geometric or triangular or something, in which case maybe it would make more sense for me to give myself a square foot, right? Or a triangular foot. I'd shape this a little more before I attached it. Or maybe I don't even want a fully completed foot in the first place. Maybe I want my foot to be, like an equal sign or little actual feet. Right? All of these are just choices that you need to start thinking about. And of course, these are, I'm just showing you for examples. They're not attached and blended down. So that's something you need to make sure that you do really well. If you want to make this into a cup, you are completely welcome to. You can add a handle or multiple handles. And that's it. I don't think many of you will get to adding underglaze today, but if you do, make sure your clay is on the drier leather hard stage. So it's not going to be glossy or shiny to the touch. And if you touch it, it doesn't feel super damp. So you might need to put it outside to dry or hair dry it. When you do use and apply underglaze, there are some brushes specifically for glaze and underglaze located on the cart where glaze is. But remember, your underglaze are in these jars, and they are located back by the ceramic tools. I would make sure it was mixed up. So I actually took my underglaze jar and shook it. Now, caution, the lids are not always on really tight, so shaking it does have some risks. And then I would want to brush this on wherever I want it, whether it's the inside, the outside, both places. And I want to brush in 2 different layers. So I'm going to brush 1 layer on, and you can see this might be a little streaky. And then I'm going to let it dry and brush my second layer in the opposite direction. So this one is horizontal, and the next one will be vertical to help remove some of these brush strokes. You will probably still see some brush strokes. It's really hard to avoid that with the underglaze. If you're brushing and you notice, my brush seems to be getting colored with my clay, especially important with the red or black clay body, wash your brush so you don't dip it into the underglaze and contaminate it. Once this is dry and you added your second layer, then we can do sgraffito, which I don't think we'll get to today. I'll talk to you about that next class. All right? Bye.